across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. There is a lot to talk about between now and 12:30. What about this Labour minister now sacked from the Health Department for saying he hoped a pensioner who didn't vote Labour would die? And that is just the tip of the iceberg. His name is Andrew Gwyn. I've interviewed him before. I know him a bit from around Westminster, and I think he's probably going to have to resign as an MP. This is really bad for the Labour Party. We're also asking today, should British politicians be more like Trump? What do you think about that? Let us know your thoughts. Also, I mean, there's so much to talk about this morning. UK Foreign Aid funded legal advice for trans asylum seekers in Britain. There's so much. I won't deport Prince Harry, says Trump. He's got enough problems with Meghan. And the big question we're asking, as well as the Trump question about the Tories calling for a pact, or some of them anyway, with reform to save the UK from Starmer and Reeves. Should there be a pact between the Conservatives and Reform UK? Let us know your thoughts about that. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Get your voice on the air. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell on Twitter, or X as no one calls it. You can send me a voice note on the main number. You can send me a WhatsApp text message on the main number. You can ring me on the main number, and that main number is 0344 499 1000. Lots to discuss. Stay with us here on Talk. We'll also be talking to the Shadow Cabinet Minister, Alex Burghardt, in just a second in regard to the big story, the big political story that's dominating today about Andrew Gwyn. He was a health minister until yesterday. Then a huge number of his WhatsApps came out saying all sorts of very, very derogatory things about Jewish people, about older people, about constituents. This is what let's just give a flavour of how combative Andrew Gwyn can be. He really got into quite a dispute with Boris Johnson in 2017. Let's just see what Andrew Gwyn is like.
We want managed immigration. We are leaving the European.
I'm not hearing an answer.
We are leaving the European Union.
Are you leaving the customs union?
We are leaving the European Union.
I asked him this last time.
Boris,
remember, I asked him this last time.
Boris, I'm sorry to say,
yes. I'm so sorry. Go on.
Don't be a pillar.
Come on. You're leaving the customs union.
No, Boris.
You're not leaving the customs union.
Boris, can you please tell people?
Are you leaving the customs union?
Can you please tell the pensioners what is happening to their winter fuel allowance? How many of them are going to lose it?
I haven't heard. Well, that obviously is
10 million?
But that is
10 million?
That is
okay,
to be.
Mr. Johnson,
that is obviously.
Well, that was in 2017, but actually there was a councillor who shared a letter in the WhatsApp group with Mr. Gwyn about asking, the resident wrote, as you've been re-elected, I thought it would be appropriate time to contact you regarding the bin collections. Mr. Gwyn replied, well, he didn't reply, he mock replied within the WhatsApp group, dear resident, F your bins, I'm re-elected without your vote, screw you, PS, hopefully you'll have croaked by the all-outs, which is another word for the local council elections. Paul Richards is with me, former Labour advisor. Hi, Paul, great to have you with me. What do you think about this? I mean, he's been sacked by Kier Starmer, and that is, I don't think too many people could argue that that's the wrong thing to do. Where does this leave Kier Starmer?
Well, the speed with which this was done, I mean, the story broke sort of mid-morning yesterday in the Mail, getting the story, and then within 3 hours he was out, not just as a minister but also as a member of the Labour Party, and so he's finished. And I think that shows you, Peter, just how seriously it was being taken. These comments are absolutely egregious, and although they were made within a private WhatsApp group, somebody has leaked those into the public domain, it just shows that this, it was beyond the pale, utterly. So it's right that he went, but it's also significant that he went quite as fast as he did. It shows that Downing Street came down on this like a ton of bricks.
When you're advising politicians, I've done it as well, there's something we both know called the Daily Mail test.
Yeah.
And actually, this is in the Mail on Sunday, so
absolutely.
That makes sense. Don't write something down, don't say something. You might think it, but don't put it down unless you're happy for it to be in the Daily Mail.
I mean, there are things within peer groups, doctors, for example, talk to each other about patients and have banter to get through their day. Politicians sometimes do as well, but, you don't write it down. You don't.
And these comments are absolutely
they're beyond the pale. They're
well.
horrible. And, that's Andrew Gwyn finished. He was a government minister a day ago, and now he's nothing. And you alluded to this into your intro, but I suspect there will be a by-election now because I don't think he can carry on as an independent. So his whole life now is over. His crumbled because of somebody leaking these WhatsApps. And it just tells you, A, politics is a brutal, brutal business, and B, don't write stupid things down on social media because it will come out.
Mr. Gwyn appeared to mock the Jewish surname of one public figure when other members of the chat asked if Marshall Rosenberg, a conflict resolution expert, would be present at a local Labour Party meeting. Mr. Gwyn reportedly said, no, he sounds too militaristic and too Jewish. Is he in Mossad? He also fantasised about a local constituent being mown down on his bicycle by a heavy goods lorry, writing, I had positive visions of him getting mown down by an Elsa Waste HGV while he's cycling to the Fallowfield Loop. We couldn't be that lucky. Well, Matthew Pennycook is the Housing Minister for Labour. He was asked about this on Sky News this morning. We did ask Mr. Pennycook to come on this programme. He said he didn't have time. This is what Matthew Pennycook said about Andrew Gwyn this morning.
I haven't seen the details of the specific WhatsApp conversations in question, but the comments that Andrew Gwyn made, let's be clear, are completely unacceptable. And the Prime Minister has been very clear from day one of this Labour government that he is determined to uphold the highest standards of public office, determined to be a government that's in the service of working people, and he's acted decisively to dismiss Andrew Gwyn for that reason.
He has acted decisively to dismiss Andrew Gwyn. There's no doubt about that from Kier Starmer. Upholding the highest standards in public office, do you think Kier Starmer is doing that, Paul?
Well, I do, and I think he's under attack on lots of different fronts, but he's getting on with the job, as he said in Prime Minister's questions this week. Even in that incident that I imagine you're about to ask about with the voice coach,
yep.
He said he was at his desk working on Christmas Eve, and we have to take that at face value, I think. So
she appears to have broken the tier restrictions on Christmas Eve.
Well, this will no doubt come out, but I mean, in PMQs he was very firm. Kier Starmer was very firm. He said, look, I was working, and then he made that contrast with what the Conservative government was doing in terms of vomit on the walls. And
yeah,
some very
absolutely not. I mean, there are clear.
So he obviously feels he's on very firm ground.
We covered Partygate extensively on this station. There's absolutely no doubt that things happened that absolutely should not. No excuse for any of that. But I think a lot of people still have questions about why a voice coach had to come on Christmas Eve.
And those are legitimate questions to ask, absolutely.
But the Metropolitan Police are not going to do anything about it.
Well, I suspect it's because they can see that there's no case to answer either.
Well, it's not that there's no case to answer, it's that the statute of limitations has ended, that they're saying essentially that you can't go back and prosecute these things even if you wanted to. That doesn't mean a crime wasn't committed at the time.
Well, I don't accept that, and I do think that he's made it clear in Prime Minister's questions that actually he was working, and that's why there was a team there putting together this statement on Brexit back in the day, and it is a while ago, and people are right to ask these questions, but I think there are bigger issues this weekend than this.
OK, we're going to talk about the fact that in just a second with the Shadow Cabinet Minister Alex Burghardt about whether there should be a Reform and Conservative pact. What do you make of that, Paul? Well,
the last time this happened in a big way was 1906, wasn't it, when the Liberals and the Labour Party did a deal. But who came out of that best was the smaller party, not the larger party. In fact, it was the death knell
but which
for the
is the
Liberal
larger party? I mean, if you look at some of the polling, Reform is in the polling anyway, Reform is the larger party.
Well, polls are a snapshot of opinion. They're not a predictor of the future. But in terms of numbers of councillors, MPs, money, size, history, the Conservatives are the larger party, which is why it would be stupid for them to go into some sort of coalition or deal or even a sort of tacit arrangement locally with Reform, because it will only be Reform who prosper from that.
But if you have an outcome, like one of the polls was essentially saying this week that there would have to be, all three parties in and around 175 MPs, nowhere near the 326 more accurately that you need for a majority. Well, some sort of a post-election deal might be needed in that case?
Well, that's based on the opinion polls today.
Yes.
And it's 3.5, 4 years until an election. And Labour's stratagem is basically to say, look, at the next election, there'll be some signs of growth, some good things will have happened in the economy. And the choice will be, do you want Kemi Badenoch or do you want Labour to carry on and finish the job? And that's going to be a very powerful argument in 4 years' time.
Let me just get a bit of reaction from our listeners here. Barry has been in touch to say, morning, Peter, there are people in prison who have said less than Andrew Gwyn has. Claire says, morning, Peter, Reform would be shooting themselves in the foot if they made any pact with the Conservatives. The Tories lost their hold on the country when they became the uni party, and any alignment with the Tories will not only destabilise Reform but alienate them to their members. There are too many bad apples in the Conservative Party who are too left-leaning, says Claire. What do you make of that, Paul?
Well, it does make the point, and she's right, Claire, that there is the Conservative Party is a coalition itself.
Well, every party's a coalition.
They are, exactly. That's part of our system, isn't it, with first past the post. So I think there are some Conservatives, and the ones named in the newspapers, who want to do this deal with the Reform Party, but there's tons of Conservatives for whom Reform are absolutely beyond the pale, who want nothing to do with them whatsoever, not just in electoral terms, but philosophically. You know, they're in totally different places. So I can't see it working without a split in the Conservative Party. Now, no political party has a right to exist, and they do come and they do go in sort of big historical terms, but the Conservatives have been around a long time, and they are the most successful electoral party probably in Western Europe. So the idea that they're going to split and disappear, I think, is unlikely, although possible. And I think they're just going to have to deal with Reform in a very different way, and trying to sort of ape Reform and, you know, kind of consume Reform, I think it won't necessarily work.
One more question just before we go to Alex Burkhart, the Shadow Cabinet Minister. Kier Starmer running up a £700,000 bill for flights in his first 3 months. Paul, really? More than Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson and Liz Truss using the similar period combined?
Good.
Good that he ran this up?
Because I want my Prime Minister out there building those alliances.
What about Britain? What about being here, running the country here?
But he's representing us on the world stage.
We've got a foreign secretary for that, Paul.
Doing trade deals. He's building up our diplomatic alliances. It's, you know, this is what we want the Prime Minister out on the world stage, punching above our weight. Quite right too. Hopefully next year double that.
Well, I think a lot of people will have to think about the fact that, you know, we have a foreign secretary. We have a David Lammy. Why can't he?
Well, he's out there as well. I mean, I'm sure somebody would have done his plane.
Racking up the plane bills as well.
But that's what it costs to have somebody on the world stage, you know.
Thank you very much indeed, Paul. We'll come back to you. That's Paul Richards there, is a former Labour advisor. Let's speak to Alex Burkhart now, who is a Shadow Cabinet Minister. He covers the Northern Ireland brief and also the Duchy of Lancaster. Alex, thanks for joining us this morning. What is your reaction to the sacking of Andrew Gwyn?
Well, I think that some of the things that Mr Gwyn said on that WhatsApp group, totally unacceptable. I think what really, amongst the bad things that have been said, the thing that stood out was that he described one gentleman as being too Jewish. Now, Kier Starmer told us that he cleaned up the Labour Party, but it very much looks this morning like he hasn't. I think there needs to be a very serious investigation, public investigation into who else was on that group. What did they say? Did they call out Mr Gwyn when he made those anti-Semitic remarks? Because otherwise I think people will just draw the conclusion that this is the same old anti-Semitic Labour Party.
Mr Gwyn has been suspended from the Labour Party. He has also been sacked as Health Minister. Is that enough, or should he resign his seat as an MP?
I don't really see how his position as an MP is tenable if he's made anti-Semitic remarks.
Okay. There is a lot of reporting around this morning about various members of your party calling for a pact with Reform UK. Is that something you support?
No, I very strongly believe that Kemi Badenoch is going to be able to lead the Conservative Party to victory at the next election. She's incredibly capable. She's pulled together. She's pulled together a very good top team, and she is holding the government to account on its disastrous budget, its failed negotiation over Chagos, its failure to set up a full public inquiry into the rape gangs, and also look, the Reform Party is saying that it wants to destroy the Conservative Party. That's not a basis for meaningful talks. I'm focused on us getting a Conservative majority at the next election.
It's a huge task to get a Conservative majority at the next election. It's not very realistic, and if you look at the polling at the moment. Reform is actually ahead of you in every single poll in the last couple of weeks. I know an election may be 4.5 years away.
That's not true. Peter, that isn't true. There was one poll that had us ahead in the past week. Some polls have us up, some polls have us down. Anyone who is obsessing about polls at this stage in the electoral cycle, quite frankly, needs to get a life, right? There is an enormous way to go before the next election, and yes, there's a fight on. Absolutely, this is a new time in British politics. We're taking that challenge enormously seriously, and I've every confidence that that just as the last election was a big swing, so can the next election be if we do the right thing and we make our case properly.
I want to ask you about a question about Kier Starmer running up a bill of £700,000 for flights in his first 3 months. That's more than Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson and Liz Truss used in a similar period combined. Should he be here more, or should he be representing us on a global stage, perhaps because of some of the damage done to your global reputation by your party?
I have no problem with Prime Ministers of the UK flying around the world to have meaningful meetings. What I'm much more concerned about is when Prime Ministers of the UK and their Chancellors bring in disastrous budgets which hurt my constituents and people across the country. Quite frankly, the fact that we're in a position where growth this week was, growth projections were cut in half because of the decisions that Rachel Reeves and Kier Starmer made at the budget in November is shocking. But the fact that people are being laid off and unemployment is going up because of the decisions they've made is shocking. I think that's the real problem here.
Alex, I just want to ask you about your Northern Ireland brief as well. There was a big story this week about the use of lethal force by SAS soldiers who shot dead 4 members of the IRA. This was in 1992 in an ambush in County Tyrone. It was not justified or reasonable, according to a judge at an inquest. I wonder if you agree with the judge, and secondly, where you think the prosecution of soldiers for historical crimes actually lies, because Labour is repealing, essentially, and changing the legacy bill which the Conservatives put through.
Yeah, look, it's a very good question, Peter, and as you say, this is a story from 1992. If you ask me whether I'm on the side of the SAS or the IRA, I'm on the side of the SAS. If you read the account of this story, the IRA, provisional IRA men who were shot were carrying Russian-made semi-automatic weapons. They had attached to the back of their vehicle a Russian machine gun, which was capable of firing 600 rounds a minute and had a range of 1,100 yards, and they had every intention of using that lethal force in order to kill innocent people in Northern Ireland. Now, you rightly say that the last government, Conservative government, brought in the Legacy Act, which would have drawn a line under the events of the Troubles and would have meant that UK soldiers would no longer have been prosecuted. The current government has taken that away, said that it would repeal it, but it has not shown us anything that it would do in its place. And so I am very concerned that in the future we will continue to see British soldiers prosecuted for things they may or may not have done a long time ago.
Thank you very much indeed. That's Alex Burkhart there. He's a Shadow Cabinet Minister, Shadow Northern Ireland Secretary and Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. Just reaction from Paul Richards to that interview there, from what Alex Burkhart was saying, especially about the Reform Pact, and also Andrew Gwyn.
Well, he said that he didn't mind Prime Ministers flying around the world, so we agree on that one. I think that's absolutely right. I think there is a huge panic inside the Conservative High Command about reform, and there's some trepidation in the Labour High Command as well. Let's not be dishonest about it, but he didn't sound like he was very keen on the idea of a pact with reform. I think it's the extremes of the Conservatives who are calling for that, not the mainstream like him. And then on the IRA question, I mean, my instinct is that this was a bad call by the judge, because I think, as he describes it, the IRA active service unit was going to do some damage, and these soldiers acted like soldiers, and I'm glad about that. So I think, these are historic cases, but I think we have to tell the armed forces that they can do their job.
The point is, within this case, listen, I'm on your side and on Alex Burkhart's side, but the point is, in this case, is that the provisional IRA members could have been hypothetically arrested. Yeah,
it's hard to arrest somebody with that much hardware who have already committed crimes and are obviously have lethal force. And, you know, it's a judgment call for the soldiers in that situation, but I think we have to back our boys when they do something like this.
Thank you, Paul. Paul's going to be back with us in a second. Brad in Cambridge says, why would Reform want to import a lot of Tory wets into the party? If there are any true Conservatives left, let them leave and join Reform. Maggie says Reform and Nigel don't need the Tories. They've got almost 200,000 membership, says Maggie in London. Well, the last one I heard was about 160,000, but yes, I know what you mean, Maggie. I'm not necessarily disputing that. Kier is always out of Britain, says Stuart. As a comparison, Trump hasn't left the USA once yet, and that's actually what we're going to talk about in just a second, because we're asking the question this morning, should British politicians be more like Trump? We're going to ask Paul that and Jennifer Ewing from Republicans Overseas. Stay with us.
We can show you this. This is about them saying how many people they have deported. Now, what do you notice about this, Noah? The fact is, there's no Labour branding on it. So they're saying they are hitting a 5-year high in migrant removals. No Labour branding, firstly. Secondly, I don't think they can do this, but they've done it in a Pantone colour, which is very similar, if not the same, as another political party, i.e. Reform UK.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Sue, who says, good morning, Peter. The awful thing about Andrew Gwyn, the Labour health minister who's been sacked now, is that it's not that he was stupid to write it down, but that those are his views, and he felt comfortable sharing them with Labour colleagues, presumably views they all share. And that's the question as well. What about the other people who are on this WhatsApp group as well? He needs to be kicked out of politics, and any other elected politician or councillor on the group named and shamed. Others have been jailed for less. Love your show, says Sue. Thank you, Sue. We're asking the question question this morning, not just about Andrew Gwyn, but also whether British politicians should be more like Donald Trump. Well, someone who I think is probably going to say yes to that is Jennifer Ewing, who's a spokeswoman for Republicans overseas. She joins Paul Richards, former Labour advisor, who is with us. Jennifer, what we see from Donald Trump, and we've got some praise for him this morning from various people, saying he hasn't left the United States yet. He's focusing on that. He's signing these executive orders. He's doing, he's being very decisive and he's being very clear in what he says, and often we don't get that clarity from British politicians.
Yeah, you're right. I think one of the number one things we're seeing from this new administration is transparency. He will talk to anyone, whether it's hostile media, whether it's a teenage podcaster. You'll see even in the press room, he's changed things around. So alternative media also has a seat at the table. That's great, more decentralization. And whether you agree with his policies or not, at least you know what they are. And he didn't pick them out of a hat. This is exactly what he's been campaigning on and what he's been listening to, what the American people wanted, whether it was secure the border or fix the economy or let's get some of this foreign policy disaster under control. So that's what all of these executive orders have been about, and people are pleased to hear it.
A politician who does what he says, Paul.
I think the lesson you can learn is clarity and repetition and just having a simple metaphorical language that cuts through. And what's interesting about Trump is that he is a disruptor in office. And what Labour can learn from that in this country is that you can't become the incumbent. You can't become the establishment. Even in office, you do have to keep shaking things up. And I think there was a secret meeting of Labour's political cabinet, where Morgan McSweeney made this point that you do need to be... The
chief of staff to Kier Starmer,
absolutely, very close advisor, saying, look, although we're in government, we have to behave like we are still the insurgents, because across the world, as we know, incumbent governments are getting booted out and disruptors are getting elected. And if Labour wants a second term, that's the lesson I would say that they can take from Trump.
Do you think that, obviously there are very strong ideological differences between Starmer and Trump. Do you think they can work together, and do you think Starmer can learn from Trump's style necessarily?
Well, we've always said, I remember Wilson sort of trying to ape JFK, and then of course Blair and Bush were very close from totally different ideological positions. And I think it's always in Britain's interest to have Labour prime ministers who can get on with their American president, even if they're a Republican. That's just geopolitics.
Jennifer.
So and I'm taking this somewhat from, I believe, a friend of the show, Scarlett Maguire from JL Partners, and she pointed out, I think Prime Minister Starmer has missed a trick here in the last few weeks, where he could have had his Love Actually moment, where Elon Musk and President Trump are being somewhat critical of the United Kingdom around free speech issues and other such things. And I think Kier Starmer could have stood up and said, wait a minute, I'm going to look after this country, and pushed back a little bit, and even if there's disagreements, he would have shown, hey, I'm looking after the people who voted for me.
The thing about the Love Actually moment, I remember Tony Blair talking about this Love Actually moment, and he said in a speech that people would long for me to just stand up to the Americans. But in real life, of course, it's not a fiction. In real life, you do that and the country suffers. So Blair made that point 20 years ago. It's a great film, but it's not how politics is conducted.
Reality.
And I think that's right, isn't it?
John in Hartford, actually I'll read that out in a second. Kenny in Edinburgh says, hi Cardi P, I would love British politicians to be more like Donald Trump. The man isn't perfect, has many flaws, and he can be a bit annoying on a regular basis. I'm paraphrasing the exact words that Kenny said because it is 10:30 on a Sunday morning. But he doesn't pretend he's something he isn't. Imagine that, a what you see is what you get politician. It's a mad, wacky notion, but I think that would be popular. And that is the problem for so many politicians in the United Kingdom, the authenticity. And we've seen the authentic Andrew Gwyn, for example, in the last 24 hours, and we don't like it. He's been sacked for his comments. And I wonder, even though there are controversies from Trump, even though there are things that people don't like, is that authenticity something that people can admire, perhaps, Paul?
I think it only takes you so far, because on the Gaza issue, for example, he made a statement that the Americans are going to take over the Gaza Strip, redevelop it, turn it into a holiday resort. Is that a policy, or is that just him speaking his brains? You know, as president, you do have to say things that will then happen. In his first term, he talked about building a wall. There isn't a wall. You know, you can only, the rhetoric takes you so far, but in office, you do have to do stuff, and I think that's how he'll come unstuck. And my fear is also, a lot of people have put total faith in this one man, and what I've learned over 40 years in politics is that, you know, everyone has feet of clay, and it's about ideas, not personalities.
Well, I would perhaps in the first term agree with you that it was about one man. That's no longer the case. This is an actual movement, and it's a very broad church movement. We know that because half of his team are former Democrats, whether it's Tulsi Gabbard, whether it's Bobby Kennedy Jr. With regards to the wall, I just have to touch on that. He wanted to build the wall. That got caught up in Congress and a lot of pushback. So I think one thing people can agree on is that Trump was talking about illegal immigration back in 2015. But look, the authenticity matters, even if people do not agree with one another. And I think you have to listen to, sometimes Trump does say things to get a reaction. He has very out-of-the-box thinking. Just on Monday, we had the shortest trade war in history with the United States and Canada and Mexico. I mean, if you looked at the markets on Monday and the news cycle on Monday, you would have thought, you know, these two huge trade wars were kicking off with our biggest allies. And of course, it was over within 24 hours. So I think what he's doing is he's trying new issues. He's talking to all sorts of people. We know now that he's having actual dialogue, and probably has been for some time, with Putin to get this war ended as quickly as possible. And I just think the more dialogue and the more diplomacy, the better. And if it doesn't fit into this perfect little box that we're used to, that's a good thing, because people in America did not think what was going on was working.
Okay. 0344 499 1000, that is the number to call. What is your reaction to what Jennifer and indeed what Paul is saying? And Alex Burkhardt as well, the Shadow Cabinet Minister we spoke to a minute ago. Barry says, morning Peter, British politicians should have the guts to be like Trump, but they never will. It's always party before country, career before conscience. One thing, Paul, as a professional operative in UK politics, that you no doubt encounter, I have encountered it as well in my previous roles within politics. The thing that just makes your heart sink all the time is when you're talking to voters and they say they're all the same. And you think, well, actually, they're not. But there is a very you talked about the establishment, there's a very anti-politics, anti-professional politician thought, and certainly from our viewers and listeners. And I wonder whether there is a way to get beyond that, or actually maybe that should just be embraced. What would your advice be if you were talking to senior people here?
This word uniparty has come out of nowhere in the last few months, and I mean your viewers are already using that term and it is that, you know, you're all the same kind of argument, but of course we're not, and there is big differences. But the way you show those differences, I think, is not by what you say but by what you do. So if you can demonstrate through policy that you are doing something differently than your opponents, whether it's left or right, by the way, then I think that does show the electorate that it is worth their vote and they can distinguish. And it's like marketing, isn't it? You need a unique selling proposition, you need differentiation, otherwise it's all the same. One word we have not used so far in this conversation is Farage. Is he the British Trump, Paul? Well, he's not, no. He is very charismatic, but I don't think he's authentic in the same way quite, and I think he you know, he has failed at his major mission, which was Brexit, giving us all this prosperity. That hasn't happened. He says if he's Prime Minister, then he can make it all work and make Brexit work properly. I think, honestly, though, what is the scenario whereby he becomes Prime Minister? In a first-past-the-post... They're ahead in the polls. They're ahead in the polls. Well, those are not votes, are they? And in a first-past-the-post system, with a broadly two-party system, and a party with, what, 4 or 5 MPs, he's not going to become Prime Minister. Final word from Jennifer and Farage, perhaps? So just this whole uniparty thing, you know, I think Reform and Farage and the entire team there, like, they are differentiating themselves on issues, net zero being the biggest one. I mean, that to me was the uniparty issue of the Conservatives and Labour in this country. My president has said, you know, we're going to deregulate, and you cannot have energy security, national security without a solid energy system. Thank you both very much. That's Paul Richards, former Labour advisor, and Jennifer Ewing, who's the spokeswoman for Republicans overseas. Great to have you in the studio. We're going to go to the debate desk in a second, and we will ask Scarlett Maguire and Reem Abraham
Should British politicians be more like Trump? We'll ask that question. And lots of people are getting in touch as well. Ben in Plymouth says, morning Peter the legend Cardwell. Very happy to answer to that. Yes, they should 100% be like Trump, but they can't. Trump has more world power and amazing people in his party. Starmer's government is weak-chinned. That is a damning indictment. John Roberts, who is in Germany, says, I'm reflecting back on Labour's first 6 months and trying to find out what they have done for the betterment of the British people. What laws, policy or actions? Please educate me on this. John will continue to have that debate as time goes on. Max in Warwickshire says, morning Peter, if Nigel Farage decides to join the Conservatives, I for one will not be voting for them. What a chicken. And yes, politicians should be a bit more like Trump and have some balls, says Max in Warwickshire. Well, we will talk more about that and get your views as well in just a second here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who's been in touch, particularly on Andrew Gwyn. This is the Health Minister until yesterday who has been sacked from his role and indeed suspended from the Labour Party. We're also talking about Donald Trump as well. We're asking the question, should British politicians be more like Trump? James has been in touch on text 87222. Andrew Gwyn, when people make unsavoury comments in public or indeed in private, which is very rarely completely confidential anyway, it shows great naivete. One also has to wonder if this is what they're prepared to say out loud. What is their actual view? I wouldn't express every thought I've ever had regarding our politicians. I'd be locked up. Lots of people getting in touch. John from Hartford as well. Hi Peter, fantastic show. How arrogant are our political elite? They just don't get it. They think it's their God-given right to exist. I hate it when they belittle Reform, saying they're not a proper political party. Look what our so-called proper political parties have done. I'm 54, I voted Tories all my life, but their betrayal of the core voters of over the past 14 years is unforgivable. I will never vote for them again. I cannot trust a single word they say. They just don't get how angry they make me mocking Reform rather than taking a long, hard look at themselves. The Conservatives are toxic. They are a joke, says John. And Darren, also on Reform, says Reform should stay away from the Tories at all costs. A split party that has been fighting like rats in a sack for as long as I can remember. Reform is a unified party and do not need destabilising influences from the Tories. Thank you, Darren. Right then, let's go to the debate desk now with Scarlett Maguire and Reem Ibrahim. Great to have you in the studio.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Scarlett is a former Labour advisor and Reem Ibrahim is a comms officer at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Let's start with Andrew Gwyn. Scarlett,
I think it's unbelievable, actually. I think you never, ever... What he said was awful, but also he's moronic to put anything down in writing. I just couldn't
You have a WhatsApp
believe
group with a lot of people, and clearly at least one of them has given this to journalists for whatever reason. But I mean, some of the stuff he said about a resident who wrote, "As you've been re-elected, I thought it would be an appropriate time to contact you in regard to the bin collections," to which he sort of proposed the following response: "Dear resident, F your bins. I'm re-elected and without your vote, screw you. PS, hopefully you'll have crooked it by the all-outs," which is another word for local council elections. I mean, that is not something that you can stand over, Reem.
It isn't, and I will say it does look bad, I think, on a surface level, but ultimately I think that he's basically been sacked for having a bit of a sense of humour. I think a lot of the jokes... Sense of humour? Yeah, I think a lot of the jokes are quite funny. You think it's a sense of humour to talk about someone called Marshall Rosenberg and to say, no, he sounds too militaristic and too Jewish. Is he in Mossad? I think that's funny. I know. I think what's obviously true is that he saw those as jokes, right? That's obviously true. And I think that we tend to be particularly harsh about people. Now, I'm the last person to defend any politician. I think that politicians tend to have a much lower standard than we should have in British politics in the first instance. That being said, I think we need to really look at the detail of what has actually been said and really have these conversations about whether or not we would like all of our WhatsApp messages leaked. You know, people make jokes in light-hearted manners, and clearly this is what Andrew Gwyn was doing. It was intended to be a joke. It was intended to be light-hearted. I think we need to be very honest about that and really think about, look at ourselves. Can we all adhere to the same standards that we seem to put on other But there's a higher standard for members of Parliament, is there not, Scarlett Maguire?
Yes. I mean, there is no question that if you are a member of Parliament, if you're somebody in a position that you have to think about what you say and that everything that you write down is public. And it's just like I say to people, they go, "Oh, I'm worried about being in the media," and I go, "Look, at a dinner party you're in public, anything that you say can be used." And anybody who is crazy enough to think that a WhatsApp group is private I've been shown messages on private WhatsApp groups by friends of mine who said, "Oh, look at what she said, look at what they said." It is complete. When are we going to grow up and understand that these things are? That's why I say he's moronic. He might have had a sense of humour. The number of people that I have said should be shot. Yeah, exactly. I've said it. I do not put it on WhatsApp. Yeah. I don't do emails. But why is that? You're saying that the jokes are perfectly fine, they're perfectly normal to make, but you just wouldn't put it in writing because that means it. No, I don't think Scarlett is saying that actually. No, I'm saying in very private, one-to-ones when I'm cross with people and they can be public figures, I might be rude about them. But actually, so you see, this is the point, right? So nobody's actually upset about the jokes themselves. We're upset about. I actually think saying. But you think that they're fine to say one-on-one? No. That's what you just said. Let's Scarlett speak. I actually think that getting to the stage of saying that a pensioner and all she wanted was her bins emptied, right, I hope you croak before, is deeply offensive, actually. And it's somebody he didn't know. I mean, at least, when I'm cross, they're very famous people that I think should be gone. But actually, no. But I mean, so he shouldn't have said it. One member of Parliament that hasn't complained about a constituent or hasn't made an offhand joke about God that she's at it again. But this isn't just the point. The point is, this isn't just offhand. This is talking about hopefully you'll have croaked by the elections. This is talking about someone being called too Jewish. I mean, this isn't funny. And Diane Abbott's only doing things because it's Black History. Exactly. That's another point that he made. Yeah. Actually, I don't think he's funny. And you don't have to think he's funny, but the point is, in the context of that WhatsApp group, clearly he thought that it was okay in that WhatsApp group because clearly other people were also having those conversations. And it's a private WhatsApp group. He trusted those people. Nothing. Yes, and he shouldn't have. The lesson from this is don't ever take anything as being private because it can always go into the public domain. But the context is, in this particular situation, he thought that he was talking to people that were there to protect him, there to defend him. They were other members of the Labour Party. And so clearly he thought that he was just
just talking to friends. Now, the lesson here is it's in writing. It can go public, but just putting it into context for what he would have been thinking at the time. I mean, this is such a minor offence in my view. So many ministers have been caught doing absolutely horrendous things. We all remember Matt Hancock and you know, all of the different scandals that we've seen over the last few years.
Okay.
This to me is so minor.
Final word from Scarlett.
I think Kier Starmer did absolutely the right thing of immediately sacking him. There was just no question about it. Okay. I mean, he showed himself unfit to be a minister on every level, including being a moron.
OK, what do you think about this? 0344 499 1000. We'll talk in a second to Reem and Scarlett about the proposed Reform UK and Conservative Pact. We'll also ask them, should British politicians be more like Donald Trump? Thanks to Joanna in Salisbury, who says, hi Cardi P, the Conservatives are spooked and so are the Labour Party. Now the trashing of reform starts from both parties. We cannot go another 4 years of Labour because they're either signing us up for things or giving away and we can never get it back. As Nadine described Kier Starmer as a dark triad. I don't remember that, but yes, I think she's referring to Nadine Durry's there. Lots of things said about all sorts of politicians that aren't particularly nice, and lots of things said by politicians that aren't particularly nice, including Andrew Gwyn. Stay with us, we'll be back in just a second, but in the meantime you can use the break to give us a call, 0344 499 1000.
This happened earlier in the week, actually. We found out that Valdo Calacane, who was the triple killer, just shocking this, was not forced to take his antipsychotic medication, in part, and I don't understand this, because he didn't like needles. This is according to a major review of the NHS care. There was a catalogue of failings identified by an independent report. It says the system got it wrong, as we know. He went on to kill Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates in June of 2023.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Lots of reaction to what Reem said. Oh, Reem, you've gone down in my estimation. These comments are not obviously jokes. They are disrespectful, disgraceful and utterly contemptible. I will never think of you in the same light again, says Nick in Kent. Penny in Essex says, good morning, Peter. What is wrong with Reem? For heaven's sake, that was no joke. He should have known better. Penny, thank you for the get well card, by the way. I really appreciate that. I'm feeling much better now, as you know. Zoe in Lancashire says, morning, Peter. What this Andrew bloke said just sums up what Labour are thinking about us British people. It is outrageous. Excuse me. And Dorothy in East Kilbride says, I respect Reeve's opinion on many matters, but defending the disgusting Labour MP's comments is way off the mark. That's Dorothy in East Kilbride. What would you say to some of those, Reem?
Well, I appreciate some of the criticisms, and I appreciate all of the viewers of talkTV. I do think that the fundamental point here is that there seems to be a bit of hypocrisy on the right. A lot of conversations about cancel culture and being pro-freedom of expression, being pro-free speech, and then as soon as somebody makes a mistake or indeed makes a couple of jokes on a WhatsApp group, whatever you think.
They're more than jokes, though. They're more than jokes.
Well,
they're deeply offensive to many people.
Many people do find that offensive, but I think that a lot of people on the right tend to have these conversations about how we shouldn't be offended, you shouldn't be a snowflake about these things. And
nobody has the right not to be offended.
Well, indeed. And as soon as a Labour politician, or any politician indeed, makes a couple of remarks on a WhatsApp group, all of the so-called free speech activists on the right are completely piling in on him.
I want to talk now about Reform UK and whether there will be a pact with the Conservatives. Scarlett, should there be?
I don't see how it can happen. I mean, there is a real difference between Reform and the Conservatives. And I think it's Nadine Dorries, actually, who said there'll be a total split in the Conservatives. Because, I mean, if they're doing it, they're only doing it. I mean, I've read all the MPs saying it, and it's quite low level people saying it, that it's an electoral pact, right? It's to try and win an election. It's not about actually believing in things. I mean, I think the biggest gainers from that pact will be the Lib Dems, because they'll lose all those sort of the sort of centrist Tories will just lose their seats. Which is what we began to see in the last election. So I don't see it working, and I see complete chaos if they try doing it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that actually what's interesting is in 2019, of course, Farage did step down all of those Brexit candidates.
Party,
when Reform was the Brexit Party, sit down those candidates in majority Conservative seats, because he saw it as, we just want to get Brexit done, and if the Tories are going to do that, then we're going to support them. That's not, you're absolutely right, it's not the same as the parties merging, it's an electoral pact. I don't see that happening in the next few years, purely because we've got so much time between now and the election. So much could happen. I mean, it really is all for the taking. I also think Reform are now very serious about wanting to completely annihilate the Conservative Party. I mean, go onto their webpage, the first thing they say is, we are going to replace the Conservative Party, we're going to destroy them. And I don't think the Conservatives will do a pact with somebody that ultimately doesn't want them to exist.
Scarlett?
Yeah, I mean, and the Daily Express said, it would be, was it the Mail, saying that Farage and Boris Johnson, and you think, wow. I mean, there's a very... Boris Johnson does not have the electoral appeal that he once did.
No,
I mean, a lot of people. He is over.
Especially post Partygate, he doesn't.
Oh yeah,
people loved him in 2019.
Maggie,
I don't think they do
precisely.
anymore.
Pete Johnson has gone.
Maggie has been in touch and said, being the cynic that I am, that headline about the Tories linking with Reform is to try to put people off voting for Reform. So hoping, and also on the Andrew Gwyn point, she says, so hoping pensioners die if you didn't vote Labour is having a sense of humour. Is Reem for real? That is disgraceful. Sean and Gloucester. Reem is an absolute legend, and I'm sorry, Scarlett always tries to defend the indefensible when it comes to Labour and their despicable behaviour. Lots of people not liking either of you today.
I think people always hate me.
Well, we're an equal opportunity station here.
Yes.
Barry says, disgraceful opinion from Reem Abraham. Police officers can be sacked for offensive messages on WhatsApp. Why not politicians? Right then, I want to move to another topic, which is the question we're asking today, which is about Donald Trump, and saying that should British politicians be a bit more like Trump? Should they be a bit, perhaps, clearer, decisive, muscular? Reem?
I do agree. I think that ultimately what Trump has been able to do is he's been quite hardline on policy, and I think this is a reaction basically because of the people that he has around him today. He comes across a lot more sensible on specific policy now than he did in 2016, and he's able to communicate that so fervently. I mean, the fact that he's able to say, this is what we're doing, this is my message, we are going to cut down the size of the state, we are going to cut down on immigration. Now, whatever your view is on all of those policies, he has been clear about it. And unfortunately, it feels as though in the UK at least, so many politicians feel incredibly vacuous. They don't believe in anything. There's such a lack of conviction. And whatever your view is on Trump, at least he believes in something.
That lack of conviction and the uni-party idea and the idea that politicians are all the same, that is something that has really taken root, I would say, in the last few months with our viewers and listeners, Scarlett. So how do British politicians try to have the integrity and the difference?
So, yes, we'll leave Trump to one side for a minute. So I absolutely agree that what British politicians, and in particular the government, has to be, is it has to be more on the front foot. More. And finally, last week, Rachel Reeves said, you know, we need to have more boosterism. And she's right. We need to say, this is a great country and we're going to make it great again. We're not going to make it great in the way that Trump is. I mean, we have to remember, Trump is talking about taking over Greenland. He's seriously talking about making Canada the 51st state.
But that's not going to happen. I mean, neither of those things are actually going to happen.
None of those things are going to happen. So
the stuff in Gaza. I mean, all of this stuff is nonsense.
The Gaza stuff is pie in the sky.
It's really scary stuff. But what we need to do is we need to say, I mean, Rachel Reeves needs to say, what she's begun to say is, look, things are really bad, but we're turning the corner. We're going to make it better.
But she's not turning the corner. I mean, ultimately what she's done is increase national insurance contributions on employers, which makes it incredibly hard for employers to employ anybody, which means that wages will remain stagnant, people will remain feeling poorer. Ultimately, I think Rachel Reeves, as a Chancellor, and indeed the Labour government's entire strategy on the economy has been a complete and utter failure. And it's all well and good having politicians say they're going to talk down the economy, they're going to say things are really bad, but then also implementing things that are doing an antithesis to that.
OK, let's Scarlett have her say.
We don't know. I mean, the thing about budgets...
Well, we do know. The growth has been revised downwards.
But we're getting more inward investment, right? We're doing better than Europe. I mean, what the Bank of England has said is the problem is there is incredible global insecurity. I mean, if Trump brings down these tariffs, right, if he starts doing tariffs on, even if he doesn't do it on Britain, which I think is very unlikely, if he's going to do it on Europe, if he's going to do tariffs, it is going to be a disaster for our economy. So actually, what we...
Sorry, just to respond to the tariffs point, sorry to interrupt, but if
you're a free trader.
I absolutely am anti-tariffs, right? Tariffs are terrible for American people, they'll be terrible for British people. That being said, just objectively, if Trump imposes tariffs on Europe and the rest of the world and doesn't impose them on the UK, it will basically force us to become wealthier. Not saying that's a good thing, tariffs are always bad, but it won't be disastrous for us.
No, but the whole global economy is bad. That's our problem, and it's what we do. And you're right. We've got to say more. I mean, we've got to say more about what the government is doing and how they're going to make things better. And that is what is lacking. Actually.
Just very briefly, I want to ask Reem. May I ask the person in the tartan dress that is defending that Labour politician, would she defend Nigel Farage if you had done the same? Reem McAbraham in your tartan dress?
I absolutely would. Reem McAbraham, I like that. I got this dress for Burns night, actually, and I seem to like it. Yeah, I would, absolutely. Any politician that makes a couple of silly jokes on WhatsApp, I absolutely would defend them for basically being a human being. I mean, and by the way, I am, maybe this view didn't know this, but I am sort of broadly speaking on the right, so it's a bit odd for me to be defending a Labour politician. Point is, this is not about party politics, it's about who the people are, and they are human beings. OK, thank you both very much. On the debate desk today, Reem Abraham, Communications Officer from the Institute of Economic Affairs, and Scarlett Maguire, former Labour advisor. Great to have them both in the studio. We're asking the question, should British politicians be more like Donald Trump? We will get an answer to that from Matthew Goodwin Freeman in just a minute or two after the news. I want your thoughts as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 7222. Send me a WhatsApp voice note as well on the main number 0344 499 1000.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. I'm here between now and 12:30. Loads to talk about this morning. There's an awful lot around. Andrew Gwyn, the health minister, has been sacked for comments including that he hoped or said or joked anyway, at least he said it in a WhatsApp group, that a pensioner would die before the next election and not be a problem to him. He joked about Diane Abbott only being on the media because it was Black History Month. He joked about a Jewish person being sounding too Jewish and asked, is he in Mossad? That's the big controversy politically today. We're also asking the question of whether should British politicians be more like Donald Trump. Lots of opinions coming into the building on that one as well. Make sure you make your voice heard. We're talking about Israel as well this hour. A hostage who told a Hamas crowd he hoped to see his wife and his daughter after release, suggesting he didn't know they were murdered on the 7th of October. Hamas being horrendous again. We'll go to Israel and we'll get their reaction because there's been so much anti-Semitism around this as well. We'll talk about the royals. We'll talk to a member of Trump's transition team in the last administration. There's lots coming up between now and 12:30, but the main thing is you. This is my show, but it's your show too. I want to get as many calls, texts, tweets, voice notes on as we can. 0344 499 1000. That's the main number, and you can give me a ring on that number. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can just give me a ring 0344 499 1000 for a live discussion on the air. Lots to talk about between now and 12:30 here on Talk. Well, lots of people getting in touch on our main question today, which is whether British British politicians, more accurately, should be more like Donald Trump. Jason in the Lake District says, if we had a Trump-style leader, we wouldn't have the small boats fiasco, the grooming gang scandal, the hate marches, and all the other nonsense. Where do we sign? And I was thinking about this, and I wonder, and certainly you believe, because, you know, I do a lot of shows here, I think I have the views of our viewers and listeners, and I know what you think. Certainly, a lot of people saying to me, you know, too much taxpayers' money being spent on inconsequential, woke rubbish in this country and overseas. A lot of people, of course, saying illegal migrants should be deported. That's not controversial. Let's just get on with it. Britain should be first in a way that America is first. People want, I think anyway, clear, direct, robust leadership. They see it with Trump. They know that it's possible. And I wonder as well whether it's not just about politics, it's also about other elements of society as well. Does it trickle down actually to wider society? Business leaders, do they need to pay heed to this? They're running a business to make money. It's not about playing the woke game. It's not about using men to model women's clothes. It's not about providing prayer rooms for Muslim staff or others. It's about making money. So why don't they just do that? And why don't they just show the leadership that needs to be shown? Let's get into all of this with Matthew Goodwin Freeman, the political commentator and Conservative councillor. Lots I want to talk to you about this morning, Matthew. You're very welcome to the programme. Do you think political leaders should be more like Trump?
Yeah, I mean, Trump has been a breath of fresh air. He talks common sense. He says it and he does it. And I think that's what people respect. But I would just caution the fact that the US system is different to what we have here in the UK. In the US, the president can, with the wave of a wand almost, sign an executive order and get stuff done. Whereas here, we have to get a bill through Parliament, get it going through both the Lords and the Commons, and get it actually then enacted. And we've seen that. I mean, look at all the trouble the previous government had with Rwanda, for example. They passed the law 3 times and still couldn't get a flight off. So it is slightly different. But I think people here are looking at two-tier Kier and then looking at Donald Trump and going, crikey, I wish we had some of that.
I think there are quite a few people who've been in touch about this as well. We're going to play some voice notes in a minute or two, but I wonder as well, I mean, Trump is unfiltered. There's no doubt about that. He says things that, I mean, I don't think, for example, this Gaza plan is ever going to get off the ground. He talks about a trade war with Canada and Mexico. That ends quite quickly. That sort of fizzles out. He talks about things like making Canada the 51st state of America. He talked about invading Greenland. I mean, I don't think any of those things things are ever going to happen, and I wonder whether the unfiltered nature and the direct nature can actually be a hindrance as well.
I actually think that's one of Trump's tactics. I think he throws all this stuff out there to see what lands and to start making people move and think differently. If we look at Mexico, for example, he was trying to get Mexico to take back illegal migrants on day one. Mexico said, no, thank you. So he whacked on tariffs. And suddenly Mexico went, all right, fine, okay, we'll take the illegal migrants if you take the tariffs away. I actually think it's Trump's plan. I think this is part of him as a businessman, not only as a politician, to get stuff done. And
making a deal I mean, he wrote a book, a very well-selling book, best-selling book called The Art of the Deal, really, where you put everything on the table and then see what sticks, essentially, that sort of tactic.
Yeah, I think exactly that. I think that's what Trump does. I think he's a businessman at heart. He wants to put America first and only focus on America. And I wish we had some of that here in Britain.
Let me ask you as well, as a Conservative councillor and political commentator, what do you make of this suggestion that Reform UK should have a pact with the Conservatives? Because at least one of the polls in the last few days suggested, if things were extrapolated, that the Conservatives will actually end up perhaps being the largest party again, but not nearly enough for a majority, and may have to team up with Reform after an election. Now, a lot of this is pie in the sky because it is they're polls that show a snapshot of opinion right now at the moment, and they can be taken in all sorts of different ways. But as a general idea, do you think Reform and the Conservatives should have a pact, Matthew?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, if Labour run this out to the largest they can, we're at least 4 years away from a general election, and every poll at the moment just shows it's going to be a mess, an absolute mess at the next election, with Labour, the Conservatives and Reform all nearly equal seats. If you look at some polls, none of them able to form coalitions with all the other parties on those wings of politics. So it's going to be a mess whatever happens, and we'll see where we are come the election. My personal point of view, I think there is some common ground between a lot of Conservatives and a lot of people in Reform. But at the moment, both parties are saying no chance of a deal, nothing's going to happen, it's us or it's no one. Let's see where we are come the election. But I think there is a lot of common ground, and we need to stop dividing everything in politics and being very territorial and start working to actually get stuff done.
I just want to remind ourselves of the big controversy today. It is about Andrew Gwyn, the former health minister. He was until yesterday a health minister in the government for Labour, of course, who said all sorts of things on a WhatsApp group that have now been made public. There was a resident, an elderly resident, who wrote, "As you have been re-elected, I thought it would be appropriate time to contact you in regard to the bin collections." And Mr Gwyn proposed the following response: "Dear resident, F your bins. I'm re-elected and without your vote. Screw you. P.S. Hopefully you'll have croaked it by the all-outs," which is talking about, as Matthew knows as a councillor, as someone who is talking about the big council elections. I just want to remind ourselves and give Labour their due. We did ask Matthew Pennycook, the housing minister, on the programme this morning. He said he didn't have time, but this is what he told Sky News a little bit earlier on about Andrew Gwyn.
I haven't seen the details of the specific WhatsApp conversations in question, but the comments that Andrew Gwyn made, let's be clear, are completely unacceptable. And the Prime Minister has been very clear from day one of this Labour government that he is determined to uphold the highest standards of public office, determined to be a government that's in the service of working people, and he's acted decisively to dismiss Andrew Gwyn for that reason.
Specific thing that Andrew Gwyn said in the WhatsApp group as well. This was with councillors and others. I'll ask Matthew about this in a second, but he appeared to mock the Jewish surname of one public figure. When other members of the chat asked if Marshall Rosenberg, a conflict resolution expert, would be present at a local Labour Party meeting, Mr Gwyn wrote in the WhatsApp group, "No, he sounds too militaristic and too Jewish. Is he in Mossad?" Well, Matthew Pennycook, the Labour minister, was asked about this on Sky News this morning.
There were anti-Semitic remarks in this WhatsApp group that nobody seemed to have paid attention to.
And that is concerning, and those remarks are completely unacceptable. And an investigation is taking place, and any action that needs to follow from that investigation will be seen through. I don't think anyone can be in any doubt about this Prime Minister or this government's commitment to upholding the highest standards in public office and to rooting out anti-Semitism from the Labour Party root and branch.
Matthew, what do you make of this, and are you in any doubt that Kier Starmer wants to uphold the greatest standards in public life?
Well, for once, and I think this might be the first time I've ever said it, I actually want to say well done to Kier Starmer, because he's actually acted really decisively and done something that a lot of people would say he should be doing.
Did he have any other option, Matthew?
Well, frankly, that's the point. He set the bar so high when they came in as government, he had to do this. I am really furious by those comments, because as a local councillor, you're supposed to be out there, you're supposed to be making yourself known to people, you're supposed to be helping, and that is part of a job as an MP as well. If you put yourself forward, you represent everyone, not just the people who voted for you. And I find it really frustrating, and I really think that this Labour Party is the real nasty party, because not only have we had that, we had Ed Miliband and all of his comments about Susan Hall during the mayoral election, where Streeting said the same, which Susan Hall actually said put her in danger. Angela Rayner calling Tories scum. You know, that's just not what
apologise for that.
Well, but that's the point. It forced an apology. People should need to think about what they say. All of us do as politicians, because we live in an age where everything is there. It's online. People have a copy of it. And the second you delete it, someone else can go and find it. So you have to be careful. But frankly, comments like what Andrew Gwyn said are utterly disgraceful, and I'm glad he's gone.
Thank you very much indeed. That is Matthew Goodwin Freeman. He's a political commentator and a Conservative councillor. We have had loads of people in touch about all sorts of issues. Thank you to Simon, who says the people of this country are desperate for a Donald Trump-like figure to get into power in 2029. The Reform Party are the only party who speak the language of our people. We want our country back. Another person says, I'd have had Trump in a heartbeat. I'm actually looking at possibilities to relocate to Florida. There's nothing left here for the British. It's over. Absolutely should our politicians be like Trump, says Stewpot from Derby. And Simon says, we're desperate for a Donald Trump-like figure to come along in 2029 and give us our country back. Let's hear some of the voice notes that you've been sending, loads of them. You can send a voice note if you want to. I'd love to hear from you, 0344 499 1000. Send it through WhatsApp, or you can give me a ring on that number as well. We'll take a call or two in a minute or two. But let's hear a voice note from Anna in Surrey talking about Donald Trump.
Morning, Peter. Yes, our politicians should be more like Donald Trump. The male politicians that I see currently, other than Nigel Farage, are weak, emasculated milksops. They are scared to say anything. And let me tell you something, gentlemen. Women out here have no respect for that type of man. The same type of man that dances across every advert like a great big drip, normally mixed race. No, the reason women voted for Trump en masse is because he stands up and he behaves like a man should. Come on, you guys out there, grow a pair. Thank you, bye-bye.
Thanks, Anna. Strong views there. Leslie says, one of the Trump team reading out on stopping the ridiculous grants given to the other countries. That's what we need to stop taxpayers' money here being given away. On Andrew Gwyn, a number of people in touch as well, including this person says, don't go down the road that Ream has chosen. It's clear Andrew Gwyn was not joking about what he thought about his constituents. This is a Labour MP, a Labour minister, saying he hoped a pensioner died by the time of the next election so they didn't need to worry about them. And Dave has said, good morning, Peter. Will the MP face prosecution for those comments, as other people have been jailed for hearty words? Well, Jackie has been in touch on Andrew Gwyn's comments with a voice note. Let's hear what Jackie has to say on that.
Morning, Peter. I think that Gwyn's comments is symptomatic of the disdain that they have for the public, this political class. I think it's absolutely outrageous that he would say something like this. And I think he definitely needs to resign as an MP. We don't want people like this representing the public.
Thank you, Jackie. Jane in Kidderminster also wants to talk about Andrew Gwyn. This is what she has to say.
Hi, it's Jane Kidderminster here. I'm just wondering if the reason the Labour Party acted so quickly, given everything else they've been so sluggish on, is that they're concerned that a whole lot more will come up, and they think if they nip that one in the bud, then the other messages or other conversations will disappear.
Thanks very much indeed, Jane. Another Jackie in Manchester wants to talk about Andrew Gwyn. Let's hear what she has to say.
The comments by Mr. Gwyn are absolutely disgusting, and I think it's symptomatic of the disdain that the political class has for the public. We've seen it time and time again. they forget that they're public servants, and I think to wish somebody dead is beyond anything I've ever heard before from a politician. I think his situation as an MP is untenable, and I would like to know what the conversations were within this WhatsApp group from other members of the Labour Party.
That, I think, is the same Jackie. Perhaps she sent 2 voice notes, but nonetheless, some common sense and reasonable questions, I think, spoken there. On Trump, Bill in Romsey says, morning, Peter, referencing Trump's politics, he is giving the people what they voted for, and that is why Reform will form the next government. If you look at the Tories under Labour, they did the opposite. And Andrew says, in answer to your question, Peter, most MPs should be like Donald Trump, i.e. in another country. Well, this is a really interesting one because there's a lot happening this morning. In terms of Donald Trump, I think there is a lot of desire for directness. I think a lot of people will say that his style is something that people can get on board with. A lot of other people will say he's an awful, horrendous person and they don't like his politics and he's dreadful and he says things that are really offensive and all the rest of it. And certainly when it comes to what he was talking about in regard to diversity, equity and inclusion, which is something we talked about yesterday, he suggested, without any evidence, he suggested that that might be a factor in that horrible plane crash that happened in Washington. I don't think that's particularly responsible. But what I do like about Donald Trump is that a lot of the time you do know where you are, and certainly he is very clear in what he says and what he wants. The Democrats, I think, previously under Joe Biden, I mean, it was just such a sclerotic kind of administration. There was so little that actually happened. And you can say what you like about Donald Trump, but he is a very decisive person and he gives a very, very clear direction. And I think people want to be led. There are so few politicians who actually lead, who say, okay, come with me, guys. You may not entirely think this is the right thing, but I'm a leader. Come with me. And showing that leadership is something that I think so few politicians in the United Kingdom actually do. Doug says maybe a Secretary of State should be interviewed by a cross-party committee, just like they do in the US. I think that's a very interesting idea, Doug. It's not quite how our system works, but certainly they have those Senate approval hearings for people who Donald Trump and every other president want to put in their cabinet. On Andrew Gwyn, Brian says it just shows how truly inept our politicians are. They all put up a false facade and lie by doing so, says Brian. Lots more to discuss, lots more calls, texts, tweets, voice notes coming into the building. Make your voice heard. 0344 499 1000 is the number to ring during the break. Get your voice on the air. We'll take some calls, texts, tweets, voice notes are coming thick and fast into the building. Next, here on Talk.
I mean, at least they're going to be arresting somebody. And the number of people I know, when their phone was stolen, they report to the police, and you get the, here's a crime number, oh, here's a note from victim support. That's it. They don't even do anything about it. They go, well, I can trace my phone to where it is. People to be able to trace their... They've literally watched people load their bike along with other people's bikes, things into a van with got the licence plate, videoed the people doing it, not tackled them because it's a large bunch of men, and obviously calling the police at the time. Police doing absolutely nothing, just routinely doing nothing. So, I mean, as you say, they just want a bit of a nice headline, and we're supposed to go, oh, police crackdown, wonderful.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
There are so many voice notes coming into this building that we've actually decided to drop an item a little bit later on, that we were going to talk about the Royals, but we're not anymore, because there's so many voice notes. There's so many people who want to talk to us. Before I take any more voice notes, and there are lots of them, and I'm going to play out as many as we can, I want to talk to Janet in North Wales. Janet, you've got in touch about Andrew Gwyn. This is the Labour MP who has been fired and indeed suspended from the Labour Party. What do you make of this controversy?
Hello, Peter. I'm really conflicted over this, because on the one hand, I was a previous Labour voter, but I have nothing but disdain and contempt for the current Labour government. However, Andrew Gwyn is my daughter's MP.
Okay.
She lives in Denton, and actually he and Angela Rayner have neighbouring constituencies.
Yeah.
All I can say is, as a local MP, he's been brilliant. He has helped with antisocial behaviour in the area, and my daughter had a particular problem, and he's been an absolute star. He actually handwrote a birthday card to my grandson with a picture of the portcullis inside, and he's been a good MP as far as I can see.
So what do you think then, Janet, when you see these comments? Because, you're saying he's been a good constituency MP, he's helped your daughter, he's clearly, that was a really nice thing to do for your grandson. Mm-hmm. I'm sure he'll treasure that card for a long time. I don't think anybody is all good or all bad necessarily, but when you see him, talking about an elderly resident, saying, dear resident, F your bins.
So that's the reason I'm calling, because this is why I say I'm conflicted. I'm a carer. I'm actually doing my job at the moment, and what the Labour government have done with the fuel. I am a working class northern white woman, and I have to tell you that Reem has got a bit of a point. There's a lot of black humour. He and Angela Rayner are neighbouring constituencies. I suspect they know each other quite well. I am sure she might have had a laugh and then given him some back had she heard that comment, but I might be wrong.
Yeah, there was a particular comment about Angela Rayner. I'm not going to read it out at this time in the morning, but it was particularly derogatory.
I know.
But are you disappointed in him, Janet?
I'm disappointed in the Labour government as a whole. I would never vote for them again. What I worry about is this complete polarisation. Somebody's absolutely, they're demonic, or they're an absolute angel. And I don't think that is the case. I don't think everything he's written, and I am sure, absolutely sure, that he is not the only MP, be it Labour, be it Tory, or even Reform, who I'm probably going to vote for next time.
Janet, I know what my answer to this question is. I can predict what your answer to the question is. Would you like me to give all of your WhatsApps to the Mail on Sunday?
Absolutely not. In fact, Peter, I would have sent you a WhatsApp message had I known how to use it.
Right, okay. Right. Well, we do all... It is I don't think...
You see, that brings us on to the next point, Peter. What an absolute numpty this man was.
Yeah. To put things in this group. Yeah.
You know, after the whole debacle with, what was he, the health secretary?
Wes Streeting?
No.
Matt Hancock.
Oh,
yes.
yeah, who could forget? Who could
Yes.
forget that name? After all of that, to actually put things down in writing, what an absolute numpty above all.
Well, I
Some
think...
of his views I absolutely hate, but I'd like to sit down and argue with him.
Yes.
But I just think we need to be a bit more balanced, because all this polarisation doesn't do our politics any good at all.
Janet, great call. Great thoughts, very interesting, and lots of... the word is nuance there, Janet. There is a nuance to this. I don't think any of those comments that I've read are in any way acceptable. I don't think Janet thinks that either, but I mean, very, very interesting nonetheless. Lots of people getting in touch about Andrew Gwyn. Colin says, on Andrew Gwyn, a Labour insider will blow the whistle on this, and all will be revealed. I have no doubt some higher up the ladder will be named. This is not an isolated case by far. We should watch this space. Deborah in Lee. The comments by Andrew Gwyn are despicable. Are the other members of the WhatsApp group going to be investigated? And did any of them report the disgusting messages or call him out? Well, there is an investigation. Now, if I was on that WhatsApp group, I would be very, very nervous, because if you stand by and let that stuff happen, well, actually, maybe you're complicit. Andy here in Alicante says this message: it's a pity British politicians don't behave more like Trump, in as much as it's obvious he wants to do the best for his country. British politicians, the current lot, the most but previous incumbents too, look like their priority is other countries, spaffing taxpayers' money abroad like there's no tomorrow while allowing needy Brits to suffer is not a good look, says Andy. I want to play 2 more voice notes before we go away for a minute or two. No, we are going to do that. Yes, we are going to do that. No, we're not going to do that. Okay, we will go to, we'll have a little break, but I'll be back in a second. We're going to talk about Israel and the fact that the hostages that Hamas terrorists have had, well, look at them. Have you seen the pictures of them? Have you seen how starved they are? They're the people who've been starved in Gaza, not the people of Gaza who look, in basically every piece of footage I've seen, pretty well fed and pretty happy, to be honest. We're going to talk about those hostages coming back. We're going to talk about anti-Semitism here in the UK, and we're going to get your calls, texts, tweets, and indeed voice notes in just a few minutes here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Lots of people getting in touch on WhatsApp and lots of people getting in touch on Twitter. I'll read out some of those tweets in a minute or two, but I want to talk about Israel now because we have 3 more hostages who have been released to their family, one particularly cruelly. Eli is his name, and he was essentially hoodwinked by Hamas terrorists who were holding him for nearly 500 days into thinking that members of his family were still alive when actually they had been murdered on the 7th of October. It's a horrendous, horrendous thing. I just want to get the latest from Yoram Confino, who's Israel correspondent for The Telegraph. Yoram, good to have you on the programme again. Just bring us up to date with what's happened in the last 24 hours in Israel, please.
So as you mentioned, the 3 hostages were released yesterday in what can only really be described as a huge terror propaganda show, where the 3 hostages were forced to be interviewed by an armed and masked Hamas terrorist journalist, as they call it. I don't know what you want to describe him as, but they were forced to give statements, of course, slamming the Israeli government. And after they were done with the parade, they were sent to Israel, where they've been obviously undergoing medical checks, and they are severely malnourished, according to the doctors who've seen them. I don't think we needed his statement to really confirm that. We could all see the images of what they look like. And of course, the families are very happy to have them back in Israel, but they're also extremely worried because they can tell that they've been terrorized in every possible way.
And actually, on that note, Yoram, I mean, some of the reporting around this has been absolutely horrendous from some elements of the media. The BBC, for example, you talked about the hostages looking very, very gaunt and very undernourished and starved, which is what happened by a Hamas terrorist starving them. And the headline in the BBC, freed Israeli hostage Eli Sharabi looks gaunt, British family says. If you look at him, anybody, a blind man on a galloping horse, can see how these people have been starved, how horrendous the treatment has been. And for him as well, there was a horrible aspect of Hamas essentially hoodwinking him in regard to the fate of other family members.
Eli Sharabi is a particularly horrible case because on the 7th of October, terrorists killed his wife, British-born wife, and his 2 children inside a safe room. And next door, his brother who lived there, they took him and Eli and brought them to Gaza. And Eli didn't know what happened to his family until he came back to Israel and was told by whoever was left of his family that they'd been killed. So his nightmare is just continuing, and the same goes for Yarden Bibas, who was released last week. His wife and 2 children are still in Gaza. We don't know if they're dead or alive. They should have come out by now. But for many of these people who are coming out, yes, their lives have been saved, but many of them are just right now actually going to start treating the trauma that is ongoing for them. So that's horrendous. And another thing I want to add is that Hamas is really, really making a point out of showing the world and Israel who's in charge here. They are roaming the streets of Gaza. They're basically in control of all of Gaza again, and they have no intentions of laying down their weapons and passing the keys to the Palestinian Authority or any other entities. So we are facing some really crucial weeks now where Israel and Hamas will soon enter into the 2nd and the 3rd phase to find out what will happen with Gaza.
What's been the reaction in Israel to President Trump's suggestion, Yotam, that Gaza be a Riviera, that Gazans go and live in Jordan or Egypt?
So it's quite interesting to see how most Israelis support this idea, because to the rest of the world, it sounds like ethnic cleansing. For Israelis, they just want to have peace. They are done with having neighbors who basically want to commit genocide. That is what Hamas wants.
There's also the fact that we've been told by so many pro-Palestinian activists, from the river to the sea, Israel will be, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, I should say. So it's interesting that ethnic cleansing is fine on one side, but not when Donald Trump suggests a removal of people.
I want to say 2 things about this. First of all, if you ask Palestinians in Gaza if they would voluntarily leave, that's not ethnic cleansing. Yep. If you force them to leave, that you could stipulate or call ethnic cleansing. But what Donald Trump wants to do and what Netanyahu wants to do is he wants to give them the option of going to other countries like Ireland and Spain and Norway, who have all said that Israel is committing genocide and that they are refugees, well, offer them a place to live then.
And Ireland has said no, unsurprisingly.
Ireland said no. Spain also said no.
Yeah, Yoram, thank you for that. Yoram Confino, Israel correspondent at The Telegraph. He's also the author of Netanyahu's Israel, Rise of the Far Right, which I got for Christmas and indeed gave as a Christmas present to someone else. Nicole Lambert is a freelance journalist here in the UK. Nicole, I just want your reaction to the release of those hostages. It's a good thing, I think, but of course it just shows and reminds us of the 60-odd hostages who are still being held by Hamas terrorists in Israel. And it shows, of course, how incredibly badly they have been treated over the last 484, I think, days.
Exactly. I mean, it's fantastic to see them, but horrific to see them in the state that they came out yesterday and, of course, over the last few weeks as well. I've got to know Ali Sharabi's family quite well because I've been to the graveyards of his British wife Leanne and their daughters at his sister's home, and the British side of the family have been really doing everything they can to bring him home. And I know that they are both relieved and really, horrified at the way he's come out and the fact that he had to take part in that grotesque spectacle where he talks about looking forward to seeing his wife and daughters, not knowing that they'd been killed on October the 7th.
It's just another act of cruelty visited on him and his family by Hamas terrorists, isn't it?
Exactly, and I think seeing how gaunt they were, and of course, as you say, we all saw that. We don't need the family to say that. We can see. It kind of brought up memories of the Holocaust, and although it's of course a very different situation, but that kind of memory is there for all of us. It's a kind of trauma that we all feel. So so of course that has brought, I think, a lot of people saying we've got to do more to bring them home, and it puts pressure on Netanyahu and the others to make sure that the next two phases of the ceasefire deal goes ahead.
I wonder what you make of the UK government's reaction, because Kier Starmer has, of course, been in touch with Emily Damari, one of the hostages who's released, who is British. He's put out statements and various things, but also we know in the last few weeks what happened on one particular day was that we were told £17 million was being taken away from maths funding in the UK for UK children. And on the same day it was announced that £17 million was being given in aid from the UK to UNRWA. And UNRWA's role, which is the welfare and refugee agency that works in Gaza, it is under the microscope, and as we know, it is riddled with Hamas terrorists. We know that a UN agency has been doing the bidding of Hamas at various points, and we know that various governments, including our own, including us as taxpayers, are giving them money, Nicole.
It's disgusting. I've got two teenage boys and they're at a comprehensive school, and I know how terrible maths teaching is in this country. We are in a crisis, and it's absolutely ridiculous that we should be giving money to UNRWA when most countries around the world are stopping dealing with UNRWA, knowing that it's riddled with terrorists. And as soon as the Labour government reinstated funding of UNRWA a few months ago, they didn't say anything about the problems that there had been. They didn't put any sort of limits on how UNRWA should behave. And for many people, UNRWA is a key part of the problem. And of course, you mentioned the idea of refugees and all of that. And part of this comes back to the fact that UNRWA it makes the Palestinians the only people in the world who inherit refugee status. And this is something they're taught in their books, that UNRWA teaches the children at their schools that one day they will return to their land, that land which is now Israel. So they're kept in refugee camps, even though they're in their own country. And so that is why UNRWA is a huge problem, not just because it houses terrorists, but because it keeps pushing this idea that the war, that this war has to continue, and one day the Jewish people that live in Israel will just disappear.
And the equivalence argument is one that I don't have any truck with whatsoever. We had a strap at the bottom of the screen. If you're watching on the screen, you can see what we call the strap in broadcasting. It's the bar at the bottom of the screen. At the moment on the screen reads Gaza ceasefire. In the BBC News in the last few days, concerns over appearance of hostages on both sides. I don't know about you, Nicole, but I haven't noticed any hostages that Israel has taken. I've noticed quite a lot of prisoners. There have been people who have murdered, raped, burned people, done things on the 7th of October. I just worry that there are so many, apparently, they say they're responsible news organisations that aren't telling the truth.
It's an utter perversity, and I have tried to call the BBC out on it. Last week, I spoke to them about the third time that they've done this, and they just completely pushed back at me and just kind of denied it. I've spoken to the family member of one of these of the victim, whose family were killed by one of the prisoners being released by Israel. And obviously, it's absolutely disgusting. It's disgusting that, first of all, that Israel has to do this, that it has to release people that have murdered innocent people in response just to get hostages back.
Yeah.
But secondly, the second perversity, that people like the BBC keep calling them hostages when they're not, they're prisoners.
Just one final thing I want to ask you. Ali has been in touch on text and says, on the emaciated state of the Israeli hostages, has it occurred that the Gaza people look similar? Nobody has enough food, so why would their enemy get more? I don't know about you, Nicole, but I haven't seen any emaciated Gazan people on the news. Have you?
I haven't. I have to say, though, I think that probably, what has happened, what Israel has been saying for a long time, is that enough humanitarian aid was getting into Gaza. And Israel is probably the only country ever in history that has been forced to feed the people it's at war with, that it's holding its own people as hostages. But the food has been going in. But Hamas has been taking that food. It's been and it's been selling it. It's meant to be given out freely to the people of Gaza. It's been selling it and using that as money to recruit new people. So while the people that we're seeing on the TV screens, probably some of them look overweight, none of them look emaciated. I don't doubt that there are people that are living in Gaza that have suffered from this.
Of course, absolutely. And we never forget that there are many people who have lived, innocent people, who've lived a horrendous life in Gaza, how the last year and a half since the retaliation, Israel defending itself after the 7th of October, that many innocent civilians have died, that this has been a horrendous thing for them. But the fact is that Hamas continues what it's doing and hasn't released the hostages.
Yeah, and why have our government never called out Hamas on this? Why have the international aid communities not called out? So they're demanding more and more humanitarian aid, but none of them are calling out the people that are stealing the aid and using it to recruit more terrorists. It's absolutely ridiculous. And as this kind of war goes on, and I see the way our government is just kind of pretending that these things don't exist, and somehow we can magically create a two-state solution with these terrorists, it just seems like mad, crazy thinking. Like, what world are we living in?
It seems pie in the sky. Listen, thank you, Nicole Lambert there, who's a freelance journalist. Appreciate your contribution this morning. Thanks also to Sharon in Cheshire. She says no marches from Israel to show hate towards Palestinians, but immediately hate marches towards Israelis while innocent families were lying dead on the 7th of October. Proof where the evil is, says Sharon in Cheshire. Sharon, I totally agree with that. We talked about that yesterday. As those attacks were happening on the 7th of October, raping, murdering, burning people, taking hostages, as they were happening, the Palestine Solidarity Committee here in the UK was planning a protest march. They rang the Metropolitan Police at 10 to 1 on the 7th of October as that was happening. Very clear what the mentality of those people is. Very, very clear. We'll talk more about Trump. We'll talk more about Kier Starmer. We'll talk about the reform deal and Israel if you want to in just a few minutes here on Talk.
long last, common sense has to prevail. The reason you make the difference about men and women's sport is men are stronger. It's that simple. So you have that sort of basis that any sports that rely on strength, physical strength, you make the distinction.
Yeah. And the IOC, its policy is a little more complicated than that. It actually is sport by sport.
Yes.
So in the Olympics, you have quite a few sports where trans women, in other words, blokes pretending to be women, are banned.
Yes.
From competing against women, and yet other sports, they are allowed to do it, including boxing.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Lots of people getting in touch in all the different ways that you can. 0344 499 1000 is, of course, the number to give me a ring on or send your voice notes. Claire wants to talk about reform. This is what Claire has to say.
Morning, Peter. Always enjoy your show. Reform would be shooting themselves in the foot if they made any pact with the Conservatives. The Tories lost their hold on the country when they became the Uni Party, and any alignment with the Tories will not only destabilise reform, but alienate them to their core voters and members. There are too many bad apples in the Conservative Party who are too left-leaning.
Claire, thank you for that opinion. Thanks also to Goat's Head Soup, who says, catch up, Peter. That Reform UK is nearly at 200,000, I said earlier on. I was out of date on Goat's Head Soup. You're very wise to point it out. At the moment, Reform UK says it has, certainly when Goat's Head Soup contacted me a little bit earlier on, 199,737 people. I'm sure they will let us know when they get to 200,000. Sandy says, Peter, stop saying a proposed reform Conservative pact. It's only proposed by a few Tories. Nigel and Zia, who is, of course, Zia Youssef, who is the chairman of Reform, have categorically ruled it out. It's not happening, not up for discussion. The end, says Sandy. Talking about Andrew Gwyn on Twitter, Krish says Andrew Gwyn's comments are anti-Semitic, racist and sexist. A one-off comment would be taken as a mistake, but repeated offensive language is not a mistake, but a clear trait. He should resign and the seat should be contested. Yes, we should. Just on Andrew Gwyn, we are going to make sure that we represent your thoughts on all of that. And Clive has asked, will Andrew Gwyn's constituency need to have a by-election? And that is an interesting point. It doesn't necessarily. He's been axed from the Labour Party. He has lost his job as a health minister, but he is still an MP. It's up to him whether to resign or not. There's nobody who can really force him to do that unless there's any sort of criminal element to it. I don't think there will be, but if he was, for example, given a sentence of more than 6 months, well then he would be suspended. What is interesting and what can happen now under new legislation, or relatively new legislation, is that there can be what's called a recall petition. So if a tenth of his constituents, so you'd need probably 7,000 or 8,000 people, I don't know how many constituents he has, but certainly quite a few people, to sign a petition to say that there should be a by-election, which he could stand in himself. But I think it's hard to predict these things, but I'm fairly sure that Andrew Gwyn will probably stand down as an MP in the next few days, and I would imagine there'll be a by-election there, and Reform, I'm sure, will want to do very well there, as will other parties as well. Lots of reaction to Reem Ibrahim as well earlier on. Phil has been in touch on Twitter to say Reem should know that there is a difference between free speech and voicing an opinion, but offensive remarks in a WhatsApp group are totally unacceptable, and she is trying to defend Gwyn's comments as jokes. I used to admire her political nous, but no more. Natalia, this is a very interesting one, Natalia, who is in Israel, says, as a Jew, I don't necessarily care all that much about the somewhat anti-Semitic, in some people's views, comment by Andrew Gwyn, especially when compared to that wishing a pensioner dead, the joke, which should absolutely be the death of his political career. On Trump as well, lots of people getting in touch. Ray Mitchell says, Trump, what? A politician who gets voted in his agenda and then gets on and does it? It will never catch on. Well, let's talk to Andrew in Hertfordshire. He's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Andrew, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good morning, Peter. God bless you. You do a fantastic job.
Oh, thanks, Andrew.
Really, no, seriously, you really do. Very objective. In relation to that BBC stuff, it's funny. They're leading with Thai people released by the terrorist Hamas. Yet the story about the Labour MP, they've hidden somewhere on the website. They're so biased, it's untrue. In relation to Trump, this is the best and most intelligent plan for Gaza and for the people that believe they're Palestinians on planet Earth.
Do you think it can work, Andrew, really?
Well, at the end of the day, who gives the money to make this rebuild? It's America. They put $18 billion into the UN. And if you think about it logically, when you go past a building site, there's a big white cylinder, and that's for a continuous concrete pour. So Trump knows to build the footings for the things that have been destroyed, it will take massive infrastructure to even begin. Yet Jordan, Egypt, Norway, Spain, Ireland, they've got hospitals, they've got doctors, they've got universities, they've got schools. But what it would do is it would break the cycle of Hamas getting more people to indoctrinate with hatred, and it would break the terror cycle. So it's a really intelligent way of viewing it.
But it may be intelligent, Andrew, and that's your view, but is it realistic? Because if you're someone who is living in Gaza at the moment, and essentially Donald Trump is saying, well, move to Egypt or Jordan, move to these other countries. Ireland, for example, in a very hypocritical move, has said it won't take Gazan refugees, for example. I wonder how realistic it is for those people just to up sticks and move, and so many of them as well.
So when Netanyahu and Trump deploy the strategy they've got for Iran, which, trust me, is a big fireworks show over Tehran, and it breaks the use of third parties, proxies, like Hamas and Hezbollah, where else would you go? And remember, there's no other option. Yeah. We either fund the rebuild and you move. I'm tired of looking at pictures on the BBC with Jeremy Bowen. Oh, look, it's all ruined. Hang on a minute. They're fit and healthy. They didn't starve. They walked back there with no problems at all. People didn't walk out of Treblinka and Belsen. We've pandered to these people for too long. Go to Jordan, go to Egypt, go to school there, get a different view of the world.
Okay.
And it's a good thing.
Okay, Andrew, thanks for your thoughts. That's Andrew in Hertfordshire there. Paul says, I hope Hamas uses this ceasefire to show the UN the proof of the 20,000 children they accuse Israel of killing. Good morning, Peter. Janet's call a little bit earlier on was a really best call of the morning, a pragmatic and rounded view on Gwyn. He should go. He hasn't got WhatsApp messages that are inappropriate. However, cops have been sacked for less and an MP should know better. That's Paul in Devon. Stuart in Perthshire says, haha, Peter, all my WhatsApps are given to the media anyway, as talk is the only place I message. Lots of people messaging us in lots of different ways. I think we could almost do the rest of the show just playing voice messages, actually. We will get through as many of them as we can, but we do have a guest on Donald Trump who's coming up after the news. Let's hear from Paula.
Morning, Peter. I don't know why your guest thinks we should be glad that Kier Starmer is out on the world stage making deals, because the only deals he seems to make are the ones that cost us money. If it's not agreeing to give away the Chagos Isles with another incentive of £18 billion, it's reparations to Caribbean islands or money for Ukraine, which I'm not necessarily against. But every time he gets on a plane, it costs us, the taxpayer, money. Thanks, Peter. Great show. Bye.
Very interesting point, Paula. Nick's in Loughborough.
Morning, Peter. It's Nick Moore from Loughborough. And there you have it. In one soundbite, Alex Burkhart. The arrogance is palpable. And watching this clip is all we need to see to realise that Reform doing a deal with the Tories would be an absolute disaster. This man is deluded beyond redemption. Have a good day, Peter.
Thank you, Nick, responding to the interview just a little bit earlier on with Alex Burkhart, the Shadow Cabinet Minister. On that Tory reform deal, Tony in Bradford's been in touch as well, sending us a WhatsApp on 0344 499 1000. Let's hear from Tony.
Hi, Peter. Great show as usual. There's no way the Reform Party should join the Conservative, not in a million years. Conservative, they've let the British public down with the left-leaning ways, with the green policies, and now followed on by the Socialist Labour Party, with Kier Starmer running the country, who's trying to stop the elections, obviously, because that's what communists do. They try to stop all the schools, like private schools, because obviously they want to take over the education system, pushing their radical policies in schools now. We're all racist. We should hate this country. We should all, have retribution and pay all these countries back for what has happened in the past. No, we need reform in power. Just stick with reform and get these commies out of government now.
Tony, thank you for that. Robin Starbridge has been in touch on the question we've been asking all morning about whether British politicians should be more like Donald Trump. This is what Tony has to say. Sorry, Rob has to say.
Pete. Yeah, you've asked the question about do we need a Donald Trump or can we have a Donald Trump in this country? The answer is no, mate, because Donald Trump is a billionaire. There's nothing the system can offer him, so he can't be corrupted like the rest of our corrupt politicians can be. Thanks, mate.
Thank you, Rob. And Lenny, thank you for your comment. He says, I believe Trump shows patriotism, a word I believe Starmer is not familiar with. That is why we envy America. Lots of opinions coming in. Make your voice heard. You can use the break for the news to give us a shout. 0344 499 1000. We do have time between now and the end of the programme. We'll get as many voice notes on and as many calls, texts, tweets, all the rest of it. Lots to discuss, including Trump and his few days of his administration. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. There's lots to discuss, including whether British politicians should be more like Donald Trump. That's the question we're asking today. We're also talking about Andrew Gwyn, the former health minister. He has been sacked because he was sending WhatsApps to various other Labour councillors and MPs apparently as well in regard to constituents, saying that he hoped someone would, a pensioner would have croaked by the next election because they were critical of what he was saying. He's also mocked someone's Jewish name. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot you want to talk about. There's a lot of calls, texts, tweets and voice notes coming into this building. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can also send me a WhatsApp voice note. We have quite a few of those to get through, but we'll get as many as we can on in the next half an hour. Again, 0344 499 1000. My Twitter is slightly groaning with lots and lots of messages. We'll try to make sure your voice is heard because this is my show, but it's your show too, here on Talk. So Andrew Gwyn is an interesting character. He's a combative character. He is the MP for Denton. He has been a senior Labour politician for some time. He's also was the health minister until yesterday. He is. Let's just get a sense of what him as a character. We'll go back to 2017, and there was quite a famous interaction between him and Boris Johnson on Brexit. We'll bring to you now.
We want managed immigration. We are leaving the European Union.
I'm not hearing an answer.
We are leaving the European Union.
Are you leaving the customs union?
We are leaving the European Union.
I asked him this last time.
Boris,
remember, I asked him this last time.
Boris, I'm sorry to say,
yes. I'm so sorry. Go on.
Don't be a pillock.
Come on. You're leaving the customs union.
No, Boris.
You're not leaving the customs union.
Boris, can you please tell people?
Are you leaving the customs union?
Can you please tell the pensioners what is happening to their winter fuel allowance? How many of them are going to lose it?
I haven't heard. Well, that obviously is
10 million.
That is
okay,
to be.
Mr. Johnson,
that is obviously.
Well, that was an interaction from some time ago. I mean, Andrew Gwyn, he's a bit of a, well, I don't want to say he's a bit of a character because that is not what he has done here. What he has done is written some very offensive things, including about a resident who wrote to him, as you've been re-elected, I thought it would be an appropriate time to contact you in regard to the bin collections. Perfectly reasonable thing to write to your MP. A councillor shared the letter in this WhatsApp group that Andrew Gwyn was part of. He proposed the following response. This is what Andrew Gwyn thought it would be appropriate, even as a joke, to send to this constituent. Dear resident, F your bins. I'm re-elected and without your vote. Screw you. P.S. Hopefully you'll have croaked it by the all-outs. Now, the all-outs are just another word for council elections. He also appeared to mock the Jewish surname of one public figure. When other members of the chat asked if Marshall Rosenberg, a conflict resolution expert, would be present at the local Labour Party meeting, Mr. Gwyn reportedly said, no, he sounds too militaristic and too Jewish. Is he in Mossad? He also made derogatory comments about Angela Rayner and Diane Abbott. In October 2019, when Ms Abbott's name became the first black person to stand at the dispatch box during Prime Minister's questions, he reportedly told the chat it was because it's Black History Month, apparently. Lots of responses to that, and lots of responses as well to the fact that Reform UK may well do a deal. Now, it's been ruled out by Nigel Farage, it's been ruled out by Zia Youssef, as has been correctly pointed out, but will they do a deal? Lots of response as well to what Reem Ibrahim said. She was our panellist who was on a little bit earlier on our debate desk. Her comments about Andrew Gwyn, and Karen's been in touch with a voice note. If you want to send me a voice note between now and 12:30, it's the same way you send a voice note to anybody else. You do it through WhatsApp and 0344 499 1000. This is what Karen had to say.
Hi Peter, I cannot believe what that Reem Ibrahim is saying. She's saying it's minor. It's not minor. She's far too young and far too inexperienced to be making comments about politics anyway. Politics is a serious game and they are serving us and they need to be held to higher standards, as you say. And I'm getting sick and tired of people like her just brushing things like this aside. He actually said he hoped someone would die, and I'm sure he said other stuff in that WhatsApp group. And it's quite disgusting, really.
Karen, thanks for your thoughts. Paul also got in touch with his thoughts on Andrew Gwyn and what Reem was saying. This is what
Hi,
Paul...
Peter. Love the show. Just looking at what that lady was saying about it's just a politician having a bit of fun. That is an absolute disgrace. Would she feel so fine about it? He's actually been very anti-Semitic. Would she be fine about it if he was being racist about black people? I don't think so. I think some of the things he said are actually disgusting, and he needs to go.
Paul, that is a view that Angela has reiterated. She says the full extent of Andrew Gwyn's comments are even worse than I thought. They are offensive, racist and unacceptable. If I wrote them, would I get a visit from the police? Says Angela. She said that on Twitter. She tweeted that to me. And actually, there's another message. Let me see if I can just find it here in regard to... Oh, yes, this person says, Mr. Gwyn has done us all a great favour. He has shown us how they really think, says that person, DH photo. And Sue, this is the one I was looking for, says, I can just see the outrage if someone was described as looking too Muslim. It's a very, very good point. I should say that Matthew Pennycook is the Housing Minister. We did ask him on this programme this morning. He said he didn't have time, but he was on Sky News this morning, and this is what he said about this controversy over his former ministerial colleague, Andrew Gwyn.
I haven't seen the details of the specific WhatsApp conversations in question, but the comments that Andrew Gwyn made, let's be clear, are completely unacceptable. And the Prime Minister has been very clear from day one of this Labour government that he is determined to uphold the highest standards of public office, determined to be a government that's in the service of working people, and he's acted decisively to dismiss Andrew Gwyn for that reason.
Well, Alex Burghardt, who is a Shadow Cabinet Minister, did come on the programme this morning. I spoke to him a couple of hours ago, asked him about this controversy, and this is what he said. Oh, sorry, I thought the clip was ready. Apologies, I mixed that up. Matt in Doncaster was in touch on Andrew Gwyn. This is what he had to say.
From Doncaster. This Andrew Gwyn, what a character he is. So if any other member of the public was to utter any kinds of words like this, which they have over the riots and different bits and pieces, they were put in jail. So when is this character going to get a knock on the door from the police? Well, we'll see. Keep up the good work, mate.
Thanks, Matt. It's an interesting one as well. Matthew Pennycook, the Housing Minister, was asked earlier about the anti-Semitism aspect. This is that Andrew Gwyn appeared to mock a Jewish surname of one public figure, conflict resolution expert, a man called Marshall Rosenberg. There was a question in this WhatsApp group about whether he was going to be present at a local Labour Party meeting. Mr. Gwyn wrote, "No, he sounds too militaristic and too Jewish. Is he in Mossad?" Mossad, of course, being the intelligence agency. This is what Matthew Pennycook said when this was put to him by Trevor Phillips on Sky News this morning.
There were anti-Semitic remarks in this WhatsApp group that nobody seemed to have paid attention to.
And that is concerning, and those remarks are completely unacceptable. And an investigation is taking place, and any action that needs to follow from that investigation will be seen through. I don't think anyone can be in any doubt about this Prime Minister or this government's commitment to upholding the highest standards in public office and to rooting out anti-Semitism from the Labour Party root and branch.
Quite a lot of people getting in touch about what our debate desk members said earlier on as well. Reem Abraham as well has come in for quite a lot of criticism. Amanda says the mistake Reem made was treating the politician the same as the bloke down the pub. Politicians are supposed to have more sense, says Amanda. Well, I spoke to Alex Burghardt, who is for the Conservatives. He's a Shadow Cabinet Office Minister, and we will hear from him in just a second. But actually, just let me mention a couple of things that various people have said. Barry's been in touch to say Gwyn should have been kicked out, not suspended. He regrets his actions, but I don't think wishing someone dead is a simple, misguided comment. Lots and lots of people getting in touch about this. I'll get to some more voice notes in a second, but let's hear what Alex Burghardt from the Conservatives had to say. What is your reaction to the sacking of Andrew Gwyn?
Well, I think that some of the things that Mr. Gwyn said on that WhatsApp group are totally unacceptable. I think what really, amongst the bad things that have been said, the thing that stood out was that he described one gentleman as being too Jewish. Now, Kier Starmer told us that he cleaned up the Labour Party, but it very much looks this morning like he hasn't. I think there needs to be a very serious investigation, public investigation into who else was on that group. What did they say? Did they call out Mr. Gwyn when he made those anti-Semitic remarks? Because otherwise I think people will just draw the conclusion that this is the same old anti-Semitic Labour Party.
That's Alex Burkhardt of the Conservatives. That question that Alex Burkhardt raised in regard to who else was on the WhatsApp group, very, very interesting point. Why didn't they call it out? Why didn't they say, Andrew, do you know what? This isn't okay. Don't say this stuff, please. Chris sent us a WhatsApp voice note about this. This is what Chris thinks.
Hi, Peter. Yeah, great show. I'd like to know who else was on those WhatsApp groups, who called him out for saying those sorts of things, who didn't, who agreed with him, who laughed along with it. I think we need to know that, because that seems to me to be equally important as to the words of that man himself.
Very, very good point, Chris. And the Labour Party do say they're looking into it now. And yeah, I mean, it's a very, very interesting point. Connor has been in touch. He says this country is on a downward spiral. It's an absolute joke, Peter. You've got MPs thinking they're smart when they're just plain corrupt. Keith in Forest says, Peter, you can almost guarantee if there is a three-way tie at the next election, the Labour and the Lib Tories will form a coalition just to keep the two-party system going and freezing out reform. Leslie says, how will Reform voters think about a deal with the Tories? How will they feel when the vote is split, allowing Labour in again, says Leslie. And on Donald Trump, something else we've been talking about this morning, Derek says, when Donald Trump visits the UK, can we keep him for a week? Quite a few tweets coming in, including on Israel. Natalia has been in touch, who says, my heart broke yesterday seeing our three men, and especially Ellie, whose story you've already shared. I'm furious with the international community for not just looking away, but blaming Israel for all of this. Shame on them all, and thank you, Peter. Thank you, Natalia. Craig says, I think you'll find that the politicians are like Donald Trump during the election and then turn into soft, cuddly toys afterwards. There are so many broken promises in order to get into Parliament. Not one has the ability to stay the course, says Craig on Twitter. And another person says, Wes Streeting has tweeted all sorts of obnoxious stuff in the past. Why is he Secretary of State for Health? Susan says, we didn't really need to know what Labour think about old people, having listened to the obnoxious left-wingers who've appeared on talkTV over the past 2 years. My husband and I could see the writing on the wall. As former Labour voters, we voted Reform at the last election. Lots more to talk about. We'll have more voice notes. We'll have more thoughts from you. You can use the break one last time to give us a call. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk.
Trump knows how to bring that message out to the people and make it a global edict. No, we will not state sanction, people bashing women up. like we saw in the Olympics just a couple of months ago. And, you know, different other horrible stories like Leah Thomas, who was constantly taking funding that was meant for women in the United States. I am so glad that Trump has stepped up and actually become the ultra-feminist. It wasn't on my bingo card for 2025.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
I don't think I've ever had as many voice notes in one show before. We will thank you so much to everybody behind the scenes, particularly Tech Up Dave, for going through all of them. We'll get some more of them on in a second. I just want to tell you that I have a very exciting announcement which is coming tomorrow. If you look at my social media, it's not about this station, it's about something else. And if you look at my social media tomorrow, there's going to be a very interesting and exciting announcement that I have to make tomorrow on social media. So if you go and follow me at Peter Cardwell on Twitter, you will see it from tomorrow morning. Phil in Nottingham has been in touch on WhatsApp voice notes about the Tory reform deal. This is what Phil has to say.
The Tories, as per one of the newspaper headlines I've seen, don't want a pact with reform to save the UK. They want it to save themselves. And we should say no. They're going to be on live support very shortly. The support is dropping. We should just let them die. And you know what? If we get the chance, let's help them pull the plug out.
Phil talking there, obviously metaphorically, about the death of the Tories as a political party. Errol in Staines on Donald Trump. This is what Errol says.
Hi Peter, great show as usual. Errol from Staines here. Just a quick one concerning Donald Trump and the presidential orders. I was under the impression that in the UK we had a thing called standing orders, which could be enacted in the same way to achieve the same thing as a presidential order. Anyway, great show. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Errol. I'm not really an expert in standing orders, but they're not quite the same thing. Someone like Daniel Britton would be able to tell us immediately all the detail in those, but they're not quite the same thing, Errol, but they don't have as much power, certainly. Mark in Lincolnshire has given me a ring on Donald Trump, 0344 499 1000. Mark, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi there, Peter.
Hi.
Hi there, mate. Yeah, first thing I wanted to say, actually, was just to do a shout-out to a fellow listener, Carolyn from Kent, whose Christmas card finally came through.
Right, because, Mark, we spoke earlier, didn't we? We spoke before Christmas, and you were telling us about you spending Christmas on your own and perhaps not having some Christmas cards. And a number of people got in touch and sent you Christmas cards, including Carolyn, which is lovely, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Very nice of her. You know, obviously, as I say, only just come through, so cheers for passing that on, Peter.
No worries at all. And tell us your views on Donald Trump, Mark.
Well, the Donald Trump thing, yeah, I think absolutely, you know, British politicians need to take a leaf out of that book, particularly, you know, along the lines of, you know, the alternate, the alt-right, you know, people, well, I wouldn't even call them alt-right, reform, you know, they should be doing it for a certain. Because one thing, I mean, as you know yourself, Peter, I've kind of joined UKIP now, I've kind of left the Reform Party, as in, you know, the celebration of reform, because I just don't think they're going to do what people think they're going to do. But an interesting question for reform voters that they need to ask themselves, because what you'll notice with Donald Trump all throughout the last few years, he did this multiple times, but I've never heard it once actually come across from Farage or anybody within reform. And that is all these policies that are coming out from Labour, have they ever once actually said they're going to roll back on any of this stuff? They haven't said it. They come out and wave their hands about, say this is ridiculous, this is disgusting, we shouldn't do this. But they've never actually. We'll
repeal this. We'll change this. We'll do it.
Yeah, they've never said that. Whereas you will notice, Donald Trump didn't give a monkeys about that kind of thing. He would say it. He didn't care. about what the left-wing activists were going to say or the left-wing media were going to say. And that's not something I ever see from Farage or Reform, which is why I left one of the reasons I left in the first place, because they just seem to want to make themselves more establishment. They don't want to rock the boat. And the crazy thing is, rocking the boat would get them more votes.
Well, it'll be very, very interesting to see what happens with Reform. I think they probably are rocking the boat to some degree, Mark, anyway. But thanks for your thoughts. As Mark in Lincolnshire. Ian in East Grinstead has sent a voice note about how aid is spent by the government. Ian, take it away.
Hi, Peter. It's Ian from East Grinstead. Going back to this UNRWA financing by the Labour government, it's absolutely disgusting what they're doing. And I think somehow that the country as a whole needs to have some type of control over the aid that's being spent by governments, whether it be Tory or Labour, because I suspect 85% of the population wouldn't want this funding to go to UNRWA, because obviously it is part of the terrorist organisation, and it's quite clearly shown it to be. We need to control the way that these governments waste our money. And that also goes for the foreign aid. I suspect we need some type of referendum on the foreign aid waste of money, as with the green waste of money.
Thank you, Ian. Appreciate that. Another Ian in Nottingham. The final one, I think, today on Andrew Gwyn. Let's play this.
Good morning, Peter. It's Ian from Nottingham. Hope you're well. Great show as normal. Listening to the show this morning and the discussion over the MP and his WhatsApp messages, it's symptomatic of what this country has reached. Certainly in the political class, they don't care. They have zero integrity and they don't give a monkeys about the British people. That's it. I wonder if whatever his name is would have said the same thing were it about a Muslim person. Don't know. They just seem to be deliberately creating and promoting division, and I don't get it, because things have been fine for years. It's just mad. Why?
Thanks for your thoughts there, Ian. Thanks for everybody who sent in messages today, and apologies we haven't been able to get all of them. My announcement is not that I've won the lottery. It will all become clear tomorrow, so fear not. And thank you to everybody who has been in touch. And coming up this afternoon, in a minute, you're going to hear live commentary about Blackburn against Wolves and the FA Cup 4th round. I am back on Thursday with Drive at 4 o'clock and with PMQs on Wednesday. I will see you then.